walking through something we've had the privilege, extreme privilege, to be involved in the last 6 months, 9 months. God, where are we? Almost a year of COVID pandemic. And basically, we have been in contact with our members, of which there's 300. We've probably spoken to practically half of them, to be honest. We've done it formally and informally and through our advisory service. And we've been able to hear their journey, support their journey in addressing COVID, in what they've discovered about it, and the incredible enthusiasm they've come back with on what they want to do next. And we have the privilege of being at this event today, and we want to share that with you. It's all new to us. We've not shared the full sort of consultation and sort of discussion we've had, but we call it Grow Back Strong, Growing Back Stronger. So I'm going to hand over to Lou, and we'll start the more formal side of our presentation. Hopefully at the end, we'll have time for bringing a couple of you in to hear what you have to say. But we'll just talk to what we've experienced and what we've learned and what we're going to do. Lou, can I pass back to you?
Yeah, sure. Folks, we're going to be a bit clunky and we're not sure who's here. So, hi, we probably know some of you, and some of you, we hope that this is a start of a lovely relationship. So I'm just going to move the slide on. I'm hoping that Gary is sending out a poll just so we have some understanding as to who's here, where you are geographically, whether you're already involved in community growing, and what your expectations are of this session. So as Karen just said, we've got expectations in the sense that we really value this opportunity to speak to you, some of whom we know and some of whom we don't, about what we've learned, and about some of the lessons learned and thoughts coming back from our membership about how we go forward into next year and well beyond. And there's a huge amount to learn from what COVID has taught us for how we're better prepared for the climate emergency. I think there's also some quite difficult questions to ask ourselves, and we'd like to invite you to join us wherever you are in kind of building something bigger and stronger. So here we go. Is this right? Am I on track? I am really sorry. I'm going to flip between two screens because being a gardener, I'm not all that technically savvy. But I think am I right, Karen?
Yeah, it's my screen now, Lou. It's slide 3. So introductions. Okay. I'm Karen Davidson. That's Lou Evans. We are Social Farms and Gardens Scotland. The only way we manage to get anything done is working in partnership and working peer to peer with our members and anyone basically who shares our belief in community growing and growing in the community. We've got about 300 official members, and we work with loads of partners everywhere, including Keep Scotland Beautiful. And we also have formed recently, out of a government working group, actually, something called the Community Growing Forum Scotland. You'll hear us talk about that because that is the vehicle of both it's 15 members. It's a representation of the community growing sector through Move Foods in the Highlands. We've got Fife Council, we've got Green Space Scotland, KSB. We coordinate this organization. It's not an organization, it's a group of who want to do stuff. Action focus. But it's taken us a wee bit while to get there because, like everyone else, COVID has kind of made us have to rethink. And it's rethink in an exciting way. So Social Farms and Gardens are where we're from, but you'll hear us talk about the Community Growing Forum because that's where we expect a lot of the work to be delivered. You'll hear us talk about our members and other partners like the Scottish Government. So our vision is that everyone in Scotland has some form of community growing space that they can get access to and get the many benefits that we know that this can bring. It's pretty broad. So I'm going to hand you back to Lou to talk about kind of, and this is something that's happened to us in the last few months. We've kind of changed our view of what we mean by community growing. We've been more expansive. We've seen how many people have been interested in growing in their household or anywhere they can get their hands on anything. So we, through the forum, have kind of changed our view. I'll hand over to Lou and she'll tell you what we mean.
So you've just seen from the last slide, our members are amazing, and historically they've been community gardening projects with some community allotment involvement. And you'll hear us dip between, terms like community gardening and community growing. So what do we mean by community growing? Well, community growing can encompass any form of growing, be it an individual working away at home, in their local community, but in their own green space or on their balcony, to people engaging in many, many different forms of types of growing: community allotments. What else have we got here? Parks, school grounds, grass verges, community gardens. The models are really broad and really varied. And the forum that Karen talked about, a lot of the people we partner with represent different networks working in different settings. So quite often the methodology as to how people engage in growing in their community might be quite different, but kind of the end result, greener, healthier, better connected, more climate friendly, more resilient communities, is essentially the same, which is why we really seek to collaborate with both green space partners who represent different broader networks, ourselves, our membership that continues to grow, which is really exciting, and government. I think probably safe to say, given that this is a session focused on climate, I think it's really important to say that climate action isn't necessarily an explicit priority for a lot of our membership. You know, the one thing that they talk about a huge amount is community well-being and health. But they are climate champions, very much so, in the sense that they work with nature, with communities. They're working with assets in their community and making them healthier and stronger and greener. It's not also community growing, as you'll be well aware, we assume it isn't just about food. So food is a real connector and a real binder, and I think has really highlighted some of the lessons that the pandemic is teaching us. So it's really shone a spotlight on things, but it's also a real connector. And when you tie some of the lessons that we heard coming out of a session that George came earlier about, bringing people together, of shared, you know, looking at appealing to people's shared identity and belonging, working across different cultures, where, you know, food is obviously something that everybody has to do every single day in some way, shape. So as I say, you will hear us dip between different models. Just going to see if I can change the slide. If anyone's got any questions, start them coming with Gary in the chat box. So we just wanted to, as I say, because we're not sure, we suspect we know who our audience is, but we're not entirely sure. We just wanted to give you a little bit of a snapshot about what's been going on for our members before we kind of, so a little bit of scene setting really, before we kind of move on to what we've learned from COVID. So it has been, well, it's been a really challenging time. It still is really, really challenging. We've got a long way to go. And our network has been really broadly affected by things. So our membership is made up of all the representative models of different types of community growing gardening across Scotland. So that could be really small scale constituted groups with a kind of running cost of maybe £500 a year just to cover their insurance and maybe some tools, to people who aren't even constituted but working under the umbrella of another group, to some quite well-funded projects that are running quite sophisticated, you could almost say, services. So here we've got two examples of Urban Roots, who down tooled come the spring, and just as the growing season started, and got involved in emergency food delivery, and quite a nascent member out in Mayfield, East Houses Development Trust, but working in an old pavilion garden, starting to develop a pavilion garden. And this was taken literally a couple of weeks ago, just to demonstrate that some people are active and out. Other members have had to close. The tier guidance at the moment, which we're seeking to interpret it through our monthly bulletin to try and keep people up to date and on track as to how they comply, means that some people are not operating at all, and they are they've shut down, or they've kind of moved how they communicate as a group online. So I think it's safe to say, when we talk about our membership, as I say, they are really broad. Some are really lightly resourced and don't have any staff. It's entirely volunteer led, to others who have got some staff, have got some funding. We're all aware that funding also has issues. They might not have secure funding, they might not have enough funding. certainly income generation opportunities ground to a halt this year, closed to running events and some other plants. So it's been a really difficult time. Difficult but hopeful, you know. So as Karen mentioned at the start, we've had a number of Zoom sessions over the last kind of couple of months. We've engaged with our network as individuals contacting us through the inquiry service, and that covers all these models across Scotland. And they've reflected back to us a lot of what we knew, but actually they've taught us a huge amount, which is our model anyway. And so just to very quickly tell you some of the things, and I'm going to look this way because I don't want to miss anything. It's been invaluable stuff. So we know, we collectively know, don't we, that the pandemic has highlighted enormously some of the green space issues about the health and well-being benefits, the opportunity to get outside and enjoy nature, the opportunity to connect safely, the opportunity to grow food, and possibly the opportunity to connect in something that's positive and productive and still largely hopeful despite what's going on. But it's also highlighted its issues of access and equity, and how lots of people don't have access to green space, or lots of people haven't had access to funding to pivot some of their activity to particularly in communities of need. So that's been you know, really essential in the learning. Lots of our network, as we said, or quite a few of our network down tools come spring, traditionally when they'd be kind of gearing up, down tools, and got involved in distributing emergency food. And funnily enough, quite a few people who've been involved in the kind of food distribution, some of the more sophisticated, I say that with a small s models, you know, not disrespectful to some of the lighter touch models, engage with distributing food, and they felt they were able to, because they already had a network and they were already connected in their local community. And I think sorry, there was something I really wanted to link into that, link back to what George was saying this morning. As so they were already embedded in, they were already trusted. So quite a few health partners, you know, contacted community growing groups and just said, can you get involved? And people did. So there's been a real agility in our network as well, which has just been extraordinary. I have to say, it hasn't surprised us because we you know, we know they're pretty diverse and pretty agile, but again, it has been really interesting. Karen, help me out.
And then, oh, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have access to changing the slides. There we go.
Okay, so just to reiterate, this was a Glasgow member who was saying, so one of the bits of feedback that's come back is, you know, a lot of our network wanting to be trusted to get on and support issues, deliver food, support connectedness in local communities, because they really value and know how much it's needed, especially at the moment. And this was a quote from one of our network who had got involved in emergency food and is now going back to green space and working very closely with the local authority, the health partnership, and the NHS. And I raised this issue of trust, how they manage to maintain services and for people to be confident in referring people to their services, particularly with these different tier levels operating. And they said that they because they down tools and got involved in organising and distributing emergency food where it's needed most, in the areas of Glasgow they were working in, they felt now that they were a trusted delivery partner, and that now what was required was, you know, green space and bringing people out safely and getting them connected again. Do you want me to do this one, Karen?
I can do this one. So quickly, with it realizing that people were coming to us and sharing with us, and we thought this is really quite special. We didn't want to formalize it as a consultation per se, but it was flocks of people at a grassroots level coming together that we facilitated with other organizations to say, wait a minute, this sector has a role to play in renewal and the coming back and the Scottish Programme for Government. We have a sector and we kind of go unnoticed. We kind of just get on with it. Most of us are volunteer led. We've got session workers maybe. But what we did hear, two distinct things. One, We need to take our rightful role. We are hopeful. We want to be part of a renewal and a grow back better. Number two, we're exhausted. Some of the funding does not come our way. It's not equitable. We need to get out there and reach communities that don't get access to growing spaces. Therefore, how do we do this? We do it if we do something together. Now, I'll talk to you about that later, what that is. But the first step of this was we kind of formalized, to some extent, as much as we do that, these conversations into our Growing Back Stronger byline campaign type thing. We're using it with all our partners. We're talking about it. It's very low key, but it's basically a foundation for people to work together in the community growing sector and movement to be able to really help facilitate some of this renewal work and climate action and environment action, et cetera, et cetera. So on the auspices of that, we went to the minister who we are most connected to, and the Minister for Rural Affairs, Marie Goujon, and Environment Bits. And we had a chat with her as well. And she agreed. She said, yes, the sector does so much for the community, has a huge role to play going forward. So basically, we putting the key points to everyone now. We say, well, how were you stronger? Where were you weaker? Where would you do things differently? How can we, as a community growing sector, come back stronger in ourselves and help everyone else to come back stronger? We can contribute more if we actually do it together on issues around green recovery, climate action, mental well-being, outdoor space, as more people get active and want to volunteer outdoors. The agility is something that has been really, really about resilience as well. The fact that we see that, honestly, taking the health and safety seriously and resetting, we've been so impressed about people just wanting to keep going when they can. Now, many have shut and moved online and do things online, but that's okay as well. They're just keeping connected with their communities. But they want to participate. And this is, most of the people we speak to, we'd just be on the phone with someone and we'll say, well, we'll ask them the questions. They want to participate in building something better. They want to connect the sector up. They want to be able to keep open, and they want to be considered a local amenity. And they want every community to have this local amenity rather than a climate challenge fund thing with a big wedge of money or this with that. How do we ensure that there's equity in the access to this? That was a big thing. However, we need to work now. The surge in demand for, and we'll hear later about some of the policy implementations of this, the surge in demand for people and organizations in local communities wanting outdoor and growing space, whether it's school households coming by and saying, oh, can I get involved? Can you show me how to do this? Because I'm really interested in gardening now. Schools wanting outdoor classrooms. We've got charities wanting outdoor space to run their sessions. We've got huge waiting lists for allotments. We've got numbers in the growing forum about the allotment waiting lists just going through the roof. And one of them I heard from Glasgow, which I loved, was that it's not the usual people, not that the usual older white people can't be involved in it, but the diversity coming through, the young people coming through, signing up for allotments. However, they're not going to get them anytime soon, are they? Because we know what brought them the waiting lists. So how do we work together to get this new surge in interest and demand for growing in our communities? Now, you'll hear more about that later, but I think we need to unpick a bit what we learned. What we learned from all of this was that there's some systemic, practical, operational, and I'll hand you back to Lou for this, but there's a lot of things that are restricting this growth. So if we work together on some very tactical things, and we've come up with, I'll introduce Lou back on this one. This is not us, this is everyone who's been speaking about it, from Scottish minister to a wee group in a back green. This is what they think we need to tackle first. And this would involve anyone who wants to get involved and engaged. And it's very much on a locality basis as well. Whether it's Scotland-wide or in your local community or in your local authority, which is a huge role as well to play. So the message from our network, they're hopeful, they're ready to step up, but many have been reporting that they're the limit of what they can do. If they really want to reset, keep abreast of guidelines and restrictions, they can't be dependent on volunteers in the same way unless they get some extra support. And that they've also had reduced income this year. Obviously, we've just heard about. So they need to spend more to be safe and open, but not much more. We are a very, very cost-effective sector in what we deliver. And as you'll hear next, they need to be at in all weathers all year round, and that can be a challenge in Scotland. So we've got some ideas on that. As I say, coming from everyone we've spoken to. Lou, do you want to pick up on that, our role?
Yeah, I just want to go back to this slide very quickly because it kind of links into some of the stuff we're talking about. Karen and I are giving you a huge amount of information and reflecting back quite a lot on two different levels. One, so that you feel more connected to the bigger picture stuff, Scotland wide, listened and heard, and about what's going on. And the other, we would like you to kind of think about what's going on in your site. So just bear with us. This picture isn't kind of, well, it's beautiful, but it's not just beautiful. So some of you who know me will know that, you know, I'm a gardener by trade. So just to kind of unpick some of the kind of metaphor, which kind of does sustain me, I have to say, quite a lot in some of this picture. So this is a cow parsley and umbellifer. They're classically known for supporting a really wide range of biodiversity and wildlife because they form landing pads. But I haven't found in nature something that better represents our network and how we could all link together if we were a bit better coordinated. So those of you who are either joining as individuals or joining as a representative community group, or maybe even an established community growing project, I see all of you as one of the seeds on these flower heads. And when we talk about community growing, if you take one, you know, individual flower head, that could be all those different models in your local green space, your local community, that we collectively aspire to people having more of and more access to. And the bigger picture is how we all link together. So that's the whole entire flower head. And how we do that is through being better coordinated. We're getting there, but actually what's been amazing about COVID is it's kind of really accelerated how we do that. You know, we approached government and said, we want sectoral guidelines for community growers. And so we now have sectoral guidelines for community growers. You know, we are a sector. You are a sector. So we've asked for better coordination, the need to grow and the need to be more widely recognised as part of the solution, and the solution to kind of some of the problems we've talked about. COVID and actually some of the issues we face regarding climate resilience, and how we meet so many of the solutions and ways of appealing to a really broad base that George talked about. We would encourage yourselves, when you're ready and able, to come under a term better outdoors, because so much of our network is reporting that actually the next really key steps for them are about reconnecting people, combating fear, getting people engaged in something positive and productive again, actually kind of small scale grassroots solutions to how we build more resilient, climate resilient. So we ask for that. We're working with Green Space Partners to just very gently start to ask people to come under a banner better outdoors. We are going to go to, well, we've spoken to government about whether we could have more of a say and manage a small fund, a small pot of money to support, which we already do through other bits of government, to support projects, you know, encountering barriers, some of which are financial. So it might be support with a planning app, you know, it might be support with the £150 that they don't have to pay for their pre-planning application to get shelter up so that they can, you know, bring more people out even in inclement weather. They can't put up a gazebo because it just blows away, or they can't transport it there. It might be some money to extend staffing hours on their veg barra in the next couple of months because their funding, you know, they've used most of their funding to respond to the pandemic and they've not been successful in getting funding. It might be small pots of money, Karen helped me out, to increase their signage or to have more of an online presence to reach broader and wider to members of the community who aren't making it out. It might be to run some sessional, you know, to bring in somebody sessional albeit under how they're operating under their tier level, to try and engage people to get them outdoors. Yesterday, I ran a session at tier level 3 with, we made Christmas wreaths, and 15 people turned out. Now, 10 of those people wouldn't normally have come out. They came out, we worked safely 2 meters apart. You know, there was one woman who's in stage 3 cancer, and she came out because she felt she would be better outdoors. And the laughter and the just the lightness through engaging in something beyond what's going on for us immediately can be enormously powerful. And that's what green space projects, when better facilitated and supported, can offer. We tie into, I say we again, us, you, we tie into a programme for government, you know, 20-minute neighbourhoods. More people should have access to green space. More people should be supported to access green space. How do we do that? We know community growing spaces are safe, and they are quite often facilitated either by volunteers or staff, managing things safely and taking things, you know, seriously and safely. We call for support for resources to support those people to work more proactively where they feel able, to be more welcoming and more aware of some of the mental health issues that we will encounter. And essentially, I'm going to pass on to Karen. We call people to work together to come under Grow Green Scotland. Karen, my notes have run out of my computers. Are you still there? Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me? Hello?
I hear you, Karen. Sorry.
Oh, you can hear me. Good. It's just all gone a bit quiet. So you were muted. You were muted. So there's a huge amount to do. We've learned a lot. And I think if we work more collaboratively, more intentionally, better connected, hence back to that picture I showed you earlier, you know, we really can play a part in building greener, stronger, more resilient, particularly climate resilient communities. So COVID for our sector, as we've said, has been really challenging, but actually it's really accelerated how we see ourselves, how we strengthen ourselves, how we look at what we need to have in place to provide a really positive, action-focused solution to our kind of next big challenge. Karen, are you ready?
I don't think we can hear you, Karen.
Karen, are you there?
Karen, we can't hear you.
Sorry, folks. I might just keep talking. If that's Karen, are you there?
I think you might have to, Lou.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to follow her notes here. So what's this got to do with climate action? So 2 pictures here. I hope you see the rainbow. It's kind of the rainbow in the right-hand one. As we talked about, our network is enormously hopeful. So yeah, what do we? How does all that we've just told you in the last 15 minutes relate to climate action? Because we know it flourishes in and tying back to some of what George was saying earlier, we know it flourishes in a community growing setting, and it can do, be that by accident or intentionally. So as we've said, if we become more intentional as a sector and more movement based, then there's a huge amount we can do. So we know that community growing sites can and do act as hubs for climate action and behaviour change, and not, you know, we know that many of our network, and I suspect many of you here, have had funding from the Climate Challenge Fund, but actually there's a huge amount of people who haven't had funding from the Climate Challenge Fund who still work intentionally with food, with producing compost, with growing more local, with food sharing, with supporting more positive discussions around bike, you know, more active travel, with looking at upscaling and recycling or uniform sharing, because it makes sense. You don't have to have the whole package, you know, we could go on, but it makes sense. So we know that food growing can be a real catalyst to sparking conversations about food waste, food sharing, bring in different cultures and the opportunity for cultural exchange, bring in this combination of leisure and services. So people come to engage in a setting or a site or across multiple sites, not because it's good for them, or not in many communities, let's face it, because their number one concern is about climate, but because it's fun, because they need some supported activity, because they maybe need to engage in feeding themselves. So there's many ways to address the kind of this mass engagement that's required as to how we get more people actively engaging with their local environment in a way that works, you know, for us and with us rather than against us, possibly not the right word. So growing rewards environmental stewardship, demonstrates cycles of nature, composting, and making more communities healthier, better cared for, and just nicer places to be, as well as this kind of growing with nature that we talked about. Sorry, I am just... Karen, are you there yet? There's also an opportunity to work across generations and to look after ourselves and our wider well-being. We talk about social justice. We know that actually many community payback teams support some of the larger infrastructure projects that are quite often required, or just, you know, heavy work and heavy lifting that's sometimes required when people break ground for the first time or build heaps such as the one you see represented in front of you. It takes time. All of this takes time. Certainly beyond the timescales of any funding cycle. You know, behaviour change takes a long time, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And actually, we have been doing it. You know, there have been communities involved in community gardening in Scotland for 20 plus years. It's not new. I think what's changing and the exciting thing is kind of like the networks are growing. We're working more collaboratively, and we are becoming increasingly intentional about the status that we as a network and your volunteers and the people who you work alongside deserve as people working with climate and with nature-based solutions and providing positive solutions and status in their community. So I don't like talking to choir, it's very bizarre. What does this mean for you? Right, sorry, I'm sorry, it's taken us a while, we're finally at you. So I think, so we've talked about what's going on big picture sectorially, but if we were to take you back to that picture of the cow parsley, that's where do you fit in? Where do you as individuals, you as community groups, you as possibly sites with a position to draw people in and to look outwards and influence more people, you know, what does this mean for you? Well, I think now is the real time to think through in your settings, who are you reaching, who aren't you reaching, what's COVID taught you? Who have you engaged with or not during COVID? Could you take on more land? Could you grow more food? Can you do possibly more by doing less? How sustainable are your operations? Do you have a plan beyond, if you're receiving funding, the next funding cycle? How do you communicate? And these aren't just aimed at yourselves. These are questions that our network brings up all the time. And so we are aware that there are barriers to all these things, and all these things need to be thought through, and they're all different in different communities. That said, there's a huge amount of experience and learning to be shared. So what we want to hear from you is, what are the barriers to you addressing some of the issues that COVID has highlighted to us in order to make yourselves better connected, more resilient, and I say better connected, not just at grassroots level in your communities, but better connected the next step up. You know, there's an enormous policy opportunity to engage in local food growing strategies, climate action. There's a whole load of kind of reviews around planning and green space just now. So how much do you or any of you want to engage in that bigger narrative? Because we need you. But that doesn't mean that you should do it. What support do you need to do it? We know there are issues around access to land, the sustainability of that. We know there's issues around contaminated land. We know there's constant issues around money and sustaining volunteer input, sustaining volunteer momentum. And of course, possibly the next big issue will be sustaining an increased surge in demand for our sites and our settings and our services. We would imagine that you will experience what we've experienced, you probably will already be experience what we've experienced in the last 6 months, which has just been, you know, double our normal working pattern. So if our collective vision is about more people having more opportunities and some of the benefits of green space that I think some people who are here just now have had, how can we take that further? How can we take these many different models, can fit in different communities, further, so that every community has access to all the benefits of green space, and every community is actually able to play its part, intentionally or not intentionally, in developing more resilient, climate resilient. Karen, are you there? This is so her narrative, and she's very powerful at it, but I'll do it my
seems to be
best.
muted.
Karen, are you there? So I just want to talk to you. We've come up with a couple of different things, haven't we? We've talked about better outdoors. We've told you about the Community Growing Forum. And I just want to leave you with Grow Green Scotland, which is kind of a piece of work for us next year with our partners in the forum and our grassroots membership. And I say our grassroots membership, I mean community gardeners, community growers, and all those different models it's encompassing. We would really like to, if we are more organised and better connected, come under some kind of banner to build momentum, to kind of maintain and build momentum with intention. And that, so that, as I say, that is about talking about what we've learned, about what we do amazingly well, and about what we'd like to do more of, but you need support with, because we're aware it's a huge ask.